Highway 50 cuts through Colorado like a knife through old leather, and my 7-Eleven sits right at mile marker 237, where the asphalt vanishes into black nothing. During daylight hours, truckers and tourists stop for fuel and stale coffee, but after 10 p.m., the only customers are folks who drive without headlights and pay with bills that smell like cemetery dirt. 3 nights ago, a woman in a wedding dress bought cigarettes with money so cold it left frost on my fingertips. My name's Austin Redhawk, and I ended up in Saguache County through a series of bad choices that started with a DUI in Denver and ended with my probation officer finding me this job. The county judge said community service would ground me to something real. Real. That's rich, considering what passes for reality out here, where the San Juan Mountains meet the valley floor, and the wind carries voices from empty graves. This place squats on land that once belonged to the Tabaguache Ute, back when buffalo moved through these valleys like dark clouds. My grandmother used to tell stories about this stretch of highway, how it was built over old migration trails, how the asphalt cracked every winter because the earth underneath refuses to stay still. She called it hungry ground, the kind that takes more than it gives. I've been working here 6 months now, living in the trailer park behind Calvillo's auto repair, and I thought I'd seen everything weird this job had to offer. Tweakers buying energy drinks at 3 a.m., truckers who talk to themselves in languages that don't exist, families traveling cross-country who stop for gas and never make it to their next destination. But those are just people being strange. What I'm dealing with now isn't people at all. It started when Esperanza Valdez, the previous night shift manager, disappeared 2 weeks ago. She left her purse, her car keys, even her diabetes medication sitting on the counter. Security footage showed her clocking in at 11 p.m., but by morning she was gone, leaving only a handwritten note tucked under the register. Follow the protocols or join the others. That's when Dale Carver, the day manager, handed me a laminated card with 6 rules written in Esperanza's careful script. He wouldn't look me in the eye when he did it, just muttered something about keeping the balance, and walked away. I thought it was some kind of joke until the first night I ignored Rule 3. The lights went out for exactly 17 minutes. When they came back on, there were handprints on the inside of the cooler doors, small ones, like children had been trapped inside pressing against the glass. But the cooler temperature never changed, and when I opened the doors, I found ice crystals arranged in perfect circles around the milk cartons. That was last Tuesday. Tonight's my 7th shift with the rules, and I'm starting to understand why Esperanza left. This isn't about stocking shelves and counting cigarettes. This is about feeding something that's been hungry since before the highway existed. Something that wakes up when the sun goes down and the last tourist drives away toward better places. The protocols aren't suggestions. They're survival instructions for a job that shouldn't exist. The laminated card sits next to the register like a prayer card for saints that don't exist. Dale handed it to me on my first night shift, his weathered face tight with the kind of worry that comes from seeing too much. He owns 3 gas stations between here and Gunnison, but this one's different. This one has protocols. Listen close, Austin, he said, tapping the card with a finger stained yellow from decades of Marlboros. Esperanza wrote these down for good reason. You follow them exact, no shortcuts, no second guessing. You understand? I picked up the card, expecting some corporate nonsense about inventory procedures or customer service. Instead, I found 6 handwritten rules in Esperanza's neat cursive. Protocol 1. Lock the front doors at exactly 11:47 p.m. Check the parking lot first. If anyone is standing motionless by the dumpster, wait until they leave before locking up. Protocol 2. Between midnight and 3 a.m., if a customer asks for directions to the old mine, tell them it's 5 miles north on Forest Service Road 794. Do not mention that the road washed out in 1987. Protocol 3. If the coffee maker starts brewing on its own, let it finish. Drink 1 cup. The taste doesn't matter. Protocol 4. Keep the radio on AM 680 after midnight. If the static forms words, write them down, but do not read them aloud. Protocol 5. When restocking the coolers, count the beer bottles in the back row. If there are more than you stocked, remove the extras and place them in the storage room. Do not open them. Protocol 6. If someone knocks on the door after closing, check their reflection in the security monitor. If they cast no reflection, ignore them completely until sunrise. "What kind of rules are these?" I asked. But Dale was already walking toward his pickup truck. "The kind that keep you breathing," he called over his shoulder. Esperanza learned them the hard way. Don't make her mistakes. That first week, I thought the protocols were some elaborate prank designed to mess with the new guy. The 7-Eleven sits alone on a stretch of highway where cell service dies, and the nearest neighbor is 15 miles away. Perfect place for mind games. But then Tuesday happened. I was restocking the Budweiser when I noticed something odd. I'd put out 2 12-packs that afternoon, but now there were 3 full rows in the back. 24 extra bottles that hadn't been there an hour earlier. They were ice cold, as if they'd been refrigerated for weeks, but the labels looked wrong somehow. The colors too vibrant, the text slightly blurred like old photographs. Protocol 5. Remove the extras. I hesitated. They were just beer bottles. What harm could come from leaving them? But something in Esperanza's careful handwriting made me reconsider. I started pulling the extras, and that's when I noticed they were heavier than normal bottles, and the liquid inside moved too slowly, like syrup. The storage room smelled like wet earth when I opened it. I set the bottles on a shelf next to old promotional displays and automotive supplies. As I turned to leave, I heard a soft popping sound, like corks being pulled. When I looked back, the bottles were empty, their contents soaked into the concrete floor in dark stains that looked almost black under the storage room's single bulb. I checked the security footage later. The cameras showed me entering the storage room with the bottles, but when I set them down, they appeared empty on screen. Whatever had been inside them never existed in the first place, at least not in any way the cameras could record. That night, I started taking the protocols seriously. Now it's Thursday, 11:35 p.m., and I'm watching the parking lot through the front windows. 3 cars have passed in the last hour, their headlights sweeping across the gas pumps before disappearing down the highway. No one stopped, no one standing by the dumpster. But there's something different tonight. The mountains look closer somehow, as if they've shifted while I wasn't paying attention. And that smell, wet earth and metal, keeps drifting in through the ventilation system, even though the nearest water source is Cochetopa Creek, 10 miles east. The clock above the lottery display reads 11:46. Time to lock up. I grab the keys and head for the front door, but as I reach for the deadbolt, I see movement in the parking lot. Someone's walking from the direction of the dumpster, their gait stiff and wrong, like they're learning how to use legs for the first time. 11:47 comes and goes. The figure keeps walking, getting closer to the windows. Protocol 1 says to wait until they leave, but what if they don't? The figure moves across the parking lot like someone walking underwater, each step deliberate but wrong. Through the window, I can see it shaped like a person. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but the proportions are off. The arms hang too long, the torso stretches too tall, and something about the way shadows fall around it makes my eyes water. 11:48 p.m. I should have locked the doors a minute ago, But Protocol 1 is clear. Wait until they leave. The thing stops directly under the parking lot's single working streetlight. Now I can see it's wearing clothes, a flannel shirt, jeans, work boots, but they hang on its frame like fabric draped over wire. When it turns toward the store, I step back from the window. Where its face should be, there's only smooth skin stretched tight over bone. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just flesh-colored canvas pulled taut. My hands shake as I grip the door keys. The rational part of my brain, the part that still believes in normal explanations, wants to call 911. But what would I tell them? That someone's playing dress-up in the parking lot? That I'm scared of a customer who might need help? The faceless thing raises one too long arm and waves at me. The gesture is friendly, almost cheerful, like a neighbor greeting me over a fence. But the way its fingers move, each digit bending at joints that shouldn't exist, makes my stomach clench. I force myself to look away and focus on the clock. 11:51. 4 minutes past the protocol deadline, but the thing hasn't left. Maybe if I ignore it long enough, it'll move on to somewhere else. Some other gas station with a cashier who doesn't know the rules. But when I look back outside, it's gone. The parking lot sits empty under the dying streetlight. Asphalt cracked and stained with decades of oil leaks. No figure, no movement. No evidence that anything was ever there except for footprints in the gravel. Long, narrow impressions that stretch from the dumpster to where it had been standing. I lock the front door with hands that won't stop trembling. The deadbolt slides home with a solid click that echoes through the empty store. Protocol 1. Complete. 4 minutes late, but complete. The radio crackles from behind the counter. AM 680, just static at this hour like always. But as I walk back to check the register, the white noise shifts, forming something that almost sounds like words. Whispered syllables that rise and fall like breathing. Protocol 4. Write them down, but don't read them aloud. I grab a pen and the order pad we use for special tobacco requests. The static continues, and gradually I can make out individual sounds. Beneath, waiting, hungry. My handwriting looks shaky on the pad as I transcribe what I hear. Red earth. Roots growing. Austin. The pen freezes in my grip. The static is saying my name. Austin. Austin. Come down below. I write it all down, each word making less sense than the last. The voice, if it is a voice, speaks in fragments, like someone talking in their sleep. But underneath the words, I hear something else. A wet, sliding sound, like something large moving through mud. Then the coffee maker kicks on. Protocol 3. Let it finish. Drink 1 cup. The machine hums and gurgles as it brews a fresh pot, even though I never turned it on. The glass carafe fills with liquid that looks too dark to be coffee, black as creek water after a storm. When the brewing cycle stops, I pour a cup and lift it to my lips. It smells like dirt and copper pennies, like the inside of a well that's been sealed too long. I take a sip, and the taste floods my mouth, bitter, metallic, with an aftertaste that reminds me of blood. But I force it down, remembering what happened when I ignored Protocol 3, my first week. The lights had gone out, and something had been moving in the darkness between the aisles. Something with too many feet. The coffee warms my stomach, and for a moment, the store feels normal again. Just a gas station at midnight. Nothing more threatening than expired milk and stale donuts. That's when I hear the knocking. 3 soft raps on the front door, polite and patient. I look up from my coffee cup to see a woman standing outside, her face pressed against the glass. She's middle-aged, Hispanic, wearing a 7-Eleven uniform identical to mine. "Austin?" she calls through the door. "It's Esperanza. I need to come in." Esperanza Valdez, the night manager who disappeared 2 weeks ago. She looks exactly like the photos Dale showed me. Same round face, same graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. But her uniform is dirty, stained with what looks like mud, and her eyes reflect the interior lights like an animal's. "Please," she says, her voice muffled by the glass. "I've been walking for hours. I'm so tired." Protocol 6. Check their reflection in the security monitor. I move to the counter where the security monitors display feeds from the parking lot cameras. The screens show the front door clearly, the glass reflecting the store's interior lights. But where Esperanza should be standing, there's only empty space. She knocks again, harder this time. "Austin, I know you can hear me. I taught you these rules for a reason. You have to let me in." Her voice changes as she speaks, becoming deeper, more resonant. Like multiple people talking at once, their words overlapping until the sound becomes something that isn't quite human anymore. I turn off the coffee maker and step back from the windows. The radio static has stopped, but I can still hear that wet, sliding sound, closer now, coming from somewhere beneath the building. Esperanza's face presses harder against the glass, her features flattening and distorting. "The rules aren't working anymore, Austin. Something's changed. Something's coming up from below. Dawn is still hours away, and I'm beginning to understand that the protocols aren't just about surviving the night. They're about keeping something buried." Hi, everyone. Before we move forward, I have something exciting to tell you. Many of you asked for stories without the strange rules, so I created a brand new channel just for that. It's called Mr. Grimm Archive. The link is in the description, or you can click the card above. I think you'll really enjoy it. So check it out whenever you want some more exciting types of stories. Also, I hope you're enjoying the 2 uploads a day. Let me know in the comments if you like some stories from your location. Now, let's continue with today's story. The thing wearing Esperanza's face stops knocking and presses both palms flat against the glass. Her breath fogs the window from the inside, even though she's standing outside. The condensation forms letters. "Help me." I grab my phone to call Dale, but there's no signal. There never is after midnight, but tonight, the screen won't even light up. The battery icon shows full charge, but the device feels dead in my hands, like all the electronics have decided to take a break from working properly. "Austin." The voice comes from behind me now, though Esperanza's mouth hasn't moved. "Look what they built this place on." I spin around, but the store is empty except for rows of snacks and the hum of refrigeration units. The voice seemed to come from the floor itself, rising through the tiles like groundwater seeping up through cracks. That's when I noticed the floor drain near the back cooler. It's an old grate, installed when the building was first constructed in 1987, and tonight, there's something wrong with it. Instead of the usual rusty metal, the grate appears to be breathing, rising and falling with a rhythm that matches my own heartbeat. I walk toward it, my sneakers squeaking on the waxed linoleum. The closer I get, the stronger that smell becomes. Wet earth and copper, like the coffee I forced myself to drink. But there's something else underneath, something organic and sweet. The smell of flowers left too long in a vase. The grate covers a drain that should connect to the building's main sewer line. But when I crouch down and look through the metal slats, I don't see pipes. Instead, there's earth. Dark, rich soil that looks like it's been recently turned. And moving through that soil, something pale and root-like that pulses with its own inner light. Austin. This time the voice comes from the drain itself. I'm down here. She put me down here. It sounds like Esperanza, but not the thing at the window. This voice carries pain, exhaustion, and something else. Hope. Who put you down there? I whisper to the drain. The other one. The one who looks like me. She came on my last shift, said she was here to replace me. I thought Dale had sent her. The voice wavers, like someone talking through water. But when I looked in the security monitor, she had no shadow. No reflection, just empty space where a person should be. I glance back at the front windows. The fake Esperanza is gone, but her handprints remain on the glass, slowly fading like frost in sunlight. She told me the rules were changing. The voice from the drain continues. Said the protocols weren't enough anymore, that something bigger was coming up from the old mines, and the 7-Eleven was just the first stop. The old mines. I remember Protocol 2. If someone asks for directions to the old mine, tell them it's 5 miles north on Forest Service Road 794, the road that washed out 36 years ago. What mines? I asked the drain. Molybdenum mine, closed in 1952 after the cave-in that killed 17 workers. They sealed the entrance, but the tunnels run for miles underground. Right under this building, under the whole valley. My grandfather worked there before the accident. The pale root things in the soil pulse faster, and I realize they're not roots at all. They're fingers, dozens of them, reaching up through the earth toward the surface. Human fingers, but wrong somehow. Too long, too thin, with nails that have grown into claws. Esperanza, how do I get you out? You don't. The only way out is down, and down leads to where they're all waiting. The miners who died, the families who came looking for them. Everyone who's gone missing on this stretch of highway over the years. They're all down there now, changed into something else. The radio crackles back to life, and this time the static forms words immediately. Feed us. Feed us. Feed us. Over and over like a prayer or a demand. I grab the order pad and write it down, but my hands are shaking so hard the words look like a child's scrawl. As I write, the coffee maker starts another brewing cycle, and the smell of copper pennies fills the air. Don't drink it. Esperanza's voice warns from the drain. Not tonight. Tonight it's not coffee anymore. But Protocol 3 is clear. Let it finish. Drink 1 cup. I learned what happens when you ignore the protocols. The rules are breaking down, she continues. Whatever's been sleeping under the mine is waking up. It's been feeding on the people who stop here, the ones who pay with cold money and drive without headlights. But now it wants more than just travelers. It wants the whole valley. The coffee maker beeps, signaling the brewing cycle is complete. I walk over and look at the carafe. The liquid inside isn't black like before. It's red. Deep crimson red with chunks of something floating in it. Don't do it, Austin. Break the rule. Let the lights go out. It's better than what happens if you drink that. I stare at the coffee pot, remembering my first week when I ignored Protocol 3. 17 minutes of darkness, handprints on the cooler doors, ice crystals in perfect circles. But those were just warnings, weren't they? Suggestions of what could happen if I didn't follow the rules. This feels different. This feels final. The front door rattles in its frame. Not knocking this time, but something pressing against it from outside. Multiple somethings. I can see shapes moving in the parking lot. Human-shaped shadows that seem to absorb light rather than cast it. Austin. Another voice joins Esperanza's, this one male with a thick Spanish accent. Austin, We need your help down here." More voices follow. A woman with a Texas drawl, a man who sounds like he's from the East Coast, a child speaking in whispers, all coming from the drain, from the dark soil beneath the building. "Who are you?" I call down to them. "We're everyone who stopped for gas and never left," the Texas woman says. "Everyone who followed the rules and ended up feeding what lives in the deep tunnels." The child's voice rises above the others. "It's hungry, mister. So hungry it hurts. And tonight it's coming up to eat the whole world." The shapes outside press harder against the door. The glass begins to bend inward, and I hear the metal frame groaning under pressure. The deadbolt that's supposed to keep them out suddenly seems as useless as tissue paper. I look at the red liquid in the coffee pot, then at the drain where dozens of pale fingers reach upward through dark earth. Behind me, the front door splinters along its edges. Dawn is still 4 hours away, and I'm starting to understand that the protocols were never about protecting me. They were about feeding it just enough to keep it sleeping. But something's gone wrong with the arrangement, and now it's waking up hungry. The coffee pot sits there like a loaded gun, waiting for me to make a choice that might not be mine to make. The red liquid has settled, and I can see what's floating in it now. Not chunks of coffee grounds, but small fragments of something that looks disturbingly like meat. Raw, pink pieces that bob gently in the crimson brew. "Don't do it," Esperanza pleads from the drain. The rule was designed to feed it gradually, a little bit of you at a time through the coffee. But tonight, it wants everything at once. The front door groans again. Through the spider-webbed glass, I count at least 6 figures pressed against the entrance. They don't have faces, just smooth expanses of skin where features should be. But they wear the clothes of travelers. A businessman's suit, a family's matching t-shirts from some tourist trap, a trucker's flannel and baseball cap. I grab the coffee pot and walk toward the storage room. If I'm not going to drink it, maybe I can at least get it away from the main area. "Austin, what are you doing?" The child's voice calls from the drain. "Breaking the rule," I say, pushing open the storage room door. "Let's see what happens when—" The storage room isn't there anymore. Instead of shelves stocked with cigarette cartons and promotional materials, I'm looking into a tunnel. Earth walls held up by rotting timber, the kind of construction they used in mining operations 70 years ago. Railroad ties line the floor, and rusty tracks disappear into darkness that seems to swallow my flashlight beam. The air smells like minerals and decay, and somewhere in that black distance I hear voices singing. Not words I recognize, but a melody that makes my teeth ache. "Welcome to the Molybdenum Queen," says a voice behind me. I turn around, and standing in the doorway is a man in mining gear. Helmet with a carbide lamp, canvas work clothes stained with ore dust, boots caked with mud that never dried. His face is pale and sunken, like he's been underground too long, but his eyes reflect light like a cat's. "Name's Roberto Archuleta," he continues, stepping into the storage room that's now a mine entrance. "Died down there in '52 when the ceiling came down. Been walking these tunnels ever since, watching over the folks who end up here. You're one of the miners who died in the cave-in. 17 of us went down that day. Only 12 bodies made it back up." He gestures toward the tunnel. "The other 5 we stayed to keep watch, to make sure nothing else came up through the cracks in the earth." "What kind of something?" Roberto's expression grows grim. Thing that was already living in the deep places when we broke through the cave wall. Old as the mountains, hungry as winter. We called it the Root Walker, on account of how it moved through the rock like tree roots growing. The coffee pot in my hand starts to vibrate. The The red liquid sloshes back and forth, and I can hear something moving inside it. Not the meat chunks. Something alive. Something that wants out. The 7-Eleven was built here on purpose, Roberto continues. The company that owns this chain, they know about places like this. Spots where the boundary between up here and down there gets thin. They build their stores on these locations and set up protocols to manage the feeding. Feeding? Every cup of coffee, every transaction after midnight, every person who follows the rules. They all give a little piece of themselves to keep the root walker satisfied, just enough to keep it sleeping in the deep tunnels. The front door explodes inward. Glass shards spray across the floor as the shadow figures pour into the store. They move like smoke given form, flowing around the aisles and converging on the storage room where I'm standing. I drop the coffee pot. It shatters on the concrete floor, and the red liquid spreads in patterns that remind me of arterial blood. But instead of soaking into the ground, it begins to glow with its own inner light. Too late, Roberto says sadly. You broke the protocol. Now it knows you're not willing to feed it anymore. The shadow figures reach the storage room doorway and stop, as if there's an invisible barrier they can't cross. But I can see them clearly now, and they're not shadows at all. They're people, or what's left of people. Their faces have been smoothed away, their features absorbed into something else, but their eyes remain. Dozens of eyes, all staring at me with desperate hunger. Austin. A new voice joins the chorus from the drain. This one I recognize. Dale Carver, my boss. Austin, you need to run. Get to the tunnel. It's the only way out now. Dale? How are you down there? Came in to check on you when you didn't answer your phone. Found the front door standing open, blood on the register, and that thing wearing your face counting cigarettes behind the counter. My face goes cold. What thing wearing my face? Looked just like you, talked like you, even knew things only you should know. But in the security monitor, it cast no reflection, just like Esperanza's replacement. I look at the tunnel Roberto appeared from. The darkness seems to pulse with its own heartbeat, and I can hear machinery running somewhere in the depths. Not modern machinery, the kind of equipment they used in the 1950s, steam-driven and loud. The mine's still operating, Roberto explains. Never stopped, even after the cave-in. Down there, time works different. The 17 of us who died were still working our shift, still trying to contain what we accidentally released. The shadow figures at the doorway begin to push against the barrier. Whatever's keeping them out is weakening, and I can see cracks appearing in the air itself, like reality is a window that's about to shatter. Austin, you have to choose. Dale's voice calls from below. Stay up there and become one of them, or come down here and help us keep it contained. What about everyone else? The people in town, the families living in the valley? If we can get the root walker back to sleep, they'll be safe. But if it fully wakes up, Roberto trails off, looking at the spreading pool of red liquid. Where it touches the tunnel walls, plants begin to grow, twisted, thorny vines that pulse with the same inner light. How long has this been going on? Every 7-Eleven is built on a site like this. Hundreds of them across the country, all managing different things that sleep in different deep places. Your store isn't unique, Austin. It's just your turn to learn what the job really requires. The barrier breaks. Shadow figures flood into the storage room, and I have 2 seconds to make a decision that will determine not just my fate, but the fate of everyone sleeping peacefully in their beds across the San Luis Valley. I step into the tunnel and start running toward the sound of machinery. The mine tunnel stretches ahead like a throat carved into the earth, and my footsteps echo off walls that weep mineral deposits in crystalline tears. Roberto stays beside me as we run, his mining helmet casting a weak circle of light that barely penetrates the darkness ahead. Behind us, I can hear the shadow figures pouring into the tunnel, but they move differently down here. Slower, more cautious, as if the earth itself opposes their presence. "Stay on the tracks," Roberto warns, pointing to the rusty rails beneath our feet. "Step off into the side passages, and you'll end up in places that don't exist on any survey map. Spaces that fold in on themselves like origami made of stone." The air grows thicker as we descend, heavy with the weight of decades and the smell of ore dust mixed with something organic. Every 50 yards, we pass alcoves carved into the tunnel walls where mining equipment sits frozen in time. Pickaxes with handles worn smooth by calloused hands, ore cars filled with rock that glitters in the lamplight. Air compressors that should have rusted away decades ago, but look freshly maintained. "The machinery never stopped," Roberto explains when he notices me staring. "Down here, 1952 is still happening. The cave-in is still falling, the workers are still dying, and the root walker is still breaking free from whatever prison held it before we accidentally drilled into its chamber." We reach a junction where 3 tunnels branch off in different directions. Each passage has a wooden sign posted at its entrance, hand-painted in the careful lettering of mine supervisors from another era. Shaft 7, molybdenum extraction. Shaft 12, deep excavation, authorized personnel only. Shaft 15, sealed by order of county safety inspector. Which way? I ask, though I already suspect the answer. Shaft 15. That's where it started, and that's where it has to end. The sealed tunnel is blocked by a wall of concrete and steel beams, but there's a gap at the bottom just wide enough for a person to crawl through. Water seeps from cracks in the concrete, forming puddles that reflect our lights like black mirrors. "Roberto, before we go in there, I need to understand something. If this has been happening since 1952, why didn't someone just destroy the mine? Blow it up, fill it with concrete, make it go away?" Roberto's expression grows grim. "They tried. 3 times. In 1954, the county brought in dynamite to collapse the main shaft. The explosion opened up 5 new passages. In 1967, they pumped the tunnels full of concrete. It hardened into shapes that looked like human bodies twisted in agony, and by morning, the concrete had cracked open from the inside. In 1981, they tried burning it out with industrial flamethrowers. The fire burned for 6 days and nights, but instead of destroying anything, it just woke up things that had been sleeping even deeper. We crawl through the gap, and immediately the temperature drops 20 degrees. My breath fogs in the frigid air, and I can see ice crystals forming on the tunnel walls despite being hundreds of feet underground. The passage opens into a vast chamber that defies the laws of physics and engineering. The ceiling stretches upward farther than our lights can reach, supported by a framework of steel and timber that seems to grow organically from the rock itself. Mining equipment fills the space, conveyor belts that move without motors, ore crushers that operate in perfect silence, and massive drilling rigs that bore holes into walls that bleed red liquid when punctured. And everywhere, there are people. They stand at their workstations like automatons, performing the same tasks they were doing when the cave-in happened 73 years ago. A man in overalls loads ore carts that empty themselves as soon as he fills them. A woman operates a drill that never reaches its target, the bit spinning endlessly in empty air. Children, God, there are children here, carry water buckets to workers who never drink, their small faces blank with exhaustion that never ends. The root walker doesn't just feed on people, Roberto explains quietly. It feeds on their purpose, their routines, their sense of meaning. It keeps them alive by giving them work to do. But the work never accomplishes anything. It's a perfect hell, eternal labor without progress or rest. In the center of the chamber stands a structure that hurts to look at directly. It's part machine, part plant, part something else entirely. Metallic roots extend from a central mass that pulses with organic rhythm, and those roots burrow into the workers' backs, connecting them to the system like power cables. The workers don't seem to notice or mind. They just keep working, smiling slightly, as if they've found perfect contentment in their endless, meaningless tasks. That's the root walker, Roberto says. Not the creature itself, but its feeding apparatus. The real thing lives much deeper, in spaces that existed before the mountains formed. Dale stands near one of the ore crushers, feeding rocks into a machine that grinds them into powder that immediately reconstitutes itself back into rocks. He looks up when he sees us, and his face shows recognition mixed with profound sadness. "Austin," he says, never stopping his work. "You came down after all. I hoped you'd be smarter than that." "Dale, we need to get you out of here." He laughs, but there's no humor in it. "Son, I've been working this shift for 3 hours or 30 years, depending on how you count time down here. I've got quotas to meet, reports to file, equipment to maintain. Can't just walk away from responsibilities." One of the metallic roots extends from Dale's lower back, connecting him to the central mass. As I watch, it pulses, and a small amount of something that looks like liquid light flows through the root toward the root walker's core. It's not just feeding on their bodies, I realize. It's feeding on their sense of duty, their work ethic, their human need to feel useful. "Exactly," Roberto confirms. "And every 7-Eleven in the country is connected to systems just like this one. Corporate headquarters knows exactly what they're doing. They find places where ancient things sleep, build stores on top of them, and create protocols that gradually feed employees and customers to keep the old hungers satisfied." I look around the chamber and count at least 40 people trapped in the feeding system. Men, women, children, all working with the focused intensity of people who believe their labor has meaning. But mixed among the miners, I see others. People wearing modern clothes, tourists with cameras around their necks, truckers in company uniforms, even what looks like a family on vacation. Everyone who stops at the 7-Eleven after midnight, I say. Everyone who pays with cold money. Everyone who asks for directions to places that don't exist. Everyone who follows the protocols and feeds the system little pieces of themselves over time. Eventually, they get pulled down here to work the eternal shift. The sound of heavy machinery grows louder, and I realize it's coming from even deeper in the mine. Whatever the root walker really is, the feeding apparatus in this chamber is just the surface level of something much larger. "Austin." A small voice calls my name, and I see a girl about 8 years old standing beside one of the conveyor belts. She wears a dress that might have been pretty once, but now it's stained with ore dust and something that looks like old blood. "Are you here to work with us?" "The work is very important. We can't stop, not even for a minute." "What's your name?" I ask her. I don't remember, but I know my job. I count the rocks as they go by. 1, 2, 3, 4. Always 4 rocks. Then the belt resets, and I count them again. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very important work. The root extending from her back is smaller than the adult's, but it pulses just as steadily, feeding her child's sense of purpose and responsibility to something that cares nothing for human life. I look at Roberto, at Dale, at all the workers trapped in their eternal labor. Then I look at the root walker's feeding apparatus, pulsing with stolen life and purpose. How do we stop it? Roberto stares at the pulsing mass of metal and flesh that dominates the chamber, his weathered face etched with 70 years of futile planning. We tried everything, he says. Severing the roots just makes them grow back stronger. Destroying the feeding apparatus only forces the root walker to create a new one. We even try talking to it, reasoning with it, but it doesn't think the way we do. The little girl continues counting rocks on her conveyor belt. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her voice echoes off the chamber walls, mixing with the sounds of pickaxes, drilling machines, and the wet, organic pulsing of the root walker's heart. There has to be something, I insist. Some weakness. Some way to break the cycle. There is, Roberto admits, but his tone carries the weight of terrible knowledge. The root walker isn't just an ancient creature. It's a fragment of something much larger, something that exists in spaces between spaces. It feeds on human purpose, because that's what connects us to reality, what makes us real rather than just dreams in a cosmic mind. Dale looks up from his ore crusher, his movements never pausing, even as he speaks. Company manual says every 7-Eleven location has an emergency protocol. Section 47B. Never implemented it myself, but the instructions are clear enough. What kind of emergency protocol? Complete system disconnect, Dale continues, feeding another rock into his machine. Sever all connections between the feeding apparatus and the corporate network, but it requires a willing participant to enter the root walker's core consciousness and manually trigger the disconnection from inside. That sounds like suicide. Roberto nods grimly. It is. The person who goes in becomes part of the root walker permanently, but their human consciousness remains intact long enough to activate the disconnect. Every 7-Eleven location connected to this network would lose power simultaneously, breaking the feeding cycle long enough for the ancient things to fall back into dormancy. How long is long enough? Maybe 100 years, maybe 1,000. Depends on how deeply they sleep when they're not being fed. The chamber shudders, and dust falls from the ceiling as something massive moves in the deeper tunnels. The root walker's feeding apparatus pulses faster, and I can see the workers' movements becoming more frantic, as if they sense a change coming. It knows we're here, the little girl says, without stopping her counting. It knows someone's thinking about breaking the rules. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. A new sound joins the mechanical noise of the eternal mine operation. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming from the passage we entered through. But these aren't the shuffling steps of shadow figures. These sound like boots on stone, like someone walking with confidence and purpose. Austin Redhawk, a familiar voice calls from the tunnel entrance. Time to come back upstairs. Your shift isn't over. I turn and see myself walking into the chamber. Same height, same build, same 7-Eleven uniform with my name tag perfectly positioned. But this other Austin moves with fluid precision, like someone who's never made an uncertain gesture in his life. That's my replacement, I realize. The thing that's been working the register while I've been down here. The duplicate Austin approaches, and in the chamber's strange light, I can see the differences. His eyes reflect the glow from the root walker's core, and when he smiles, his teeth are too white, too perfect, like porcelain crafted by someone who's never seen real human teeth. The customers are getting restless, the duplicate says. 3 truckers stopped for fuel in the last hour, and they all paid with money that smelled like graveyards. If someone doesn't process their transactions properly, they might start asking questions about why the protocols exist. Let them ask questions, I say. Oh, Austin. The duplicate shakes his head sadly. You still don't understand how this works. The protocols aren't just for feeding the root walker. They're for protecting the outside world from seeing what really happens here. Every rule you follow, every coffee cup you drink, every late-night customer you serve. It all maintains the illusion that this is just a normal gas station on a lonely highway. Roberto steps between me and my duplicate. The boy is not going back upstairs. He's seen too much now. Either he joins us down here, or he activates the emergency protocol. There is another option, the duplicate says, and its voice changes, becoming deeper, more resonant. Multiple tones overlay each other, creating harmonies that human vocal cords couldn't produce. Austin could take Esperanza's place as night manager, learn to maintain the feeding system properly, ensure the protocols are followed precisely. Become part of the corporate structure, you mean? Become part of something larger than yourself. Something that spans continents and decades and connects hundreds of locations like this one. You'd have purpose, Austin. Real purpose. Not just scanning barcodes and stocking shelves, but maintaining the delicate balance between the human world and the ancient hungers that sleep beneath it. The duplicate extends its hand, and I can see metallic threads beneath its skin, similar to the roots that connect the workers to the feeding apparatus. Join willingly, and you'll retain your consciousness, your memories, your sense of self. You'll just be connected to something greater. I look around the chamber at all the workers trapped in their eternal shifts. Dale crushing rocks that reform themselves. The little girl counting the same 4 objects over and over. Esperanza somewhere below, still trying to manage inventory that doesn't exist. They all have purpose. They all have important work to do. They're all perfectly content with their circumstances. No, I say. The duplicate's smile falters. Austin, you're making this much more difficult than it needs to be. There are shadow figures stationed at every exit from this mine. There are replacement versions of you ready to staff every 7-Eleven in Colorado. The system will continue with or without your cooperation. Maybe. But it won't continue here. I walk toward the root walker's feeding apparatus. Up close, it's even more disturbing, a fusion of mining equipment and organic tissue that pulses with stolen life force. At its center, there's an opening just large enough for a person to enter. The interior glows with soft, phosphorescent light, and I can hear something like whispered conversations coming from within. Austin, don't, Roberto calls. Once you go in there, there's no coming back. I know. The emergency protocol will disconnect this location, but it won't stop the other 7-Elevens. There are hundreds of them, feeding hundreds of different ancient things. This is just one node in a much larger network. I know that too. But maybe if enough nodes disconnect, the whole system becomes unstable. Maybe other people will figure out what their protocols really mean. The duplicate Austin lunges toward me, but Roberto intercepts it. They grapple at the edge of the feeding apparatus, and I can see that Roberto's mining gear is more than just clothing. It's part of him now, fused with his body after 70 years underground. Go, Roberto shouts. Before it calls for reinforcements, I step into the opening at the heart of the root walker's core. The world changes instantly. I'm no longer in a mind chamber, but in a space that exists between thoughts, between breaths, between heartbeats. The root walker's consciousness surrounds me like warm water, and I can feel its vast hunger, its ancient loneliness, its desperate need to connect with something real. It's not evil, I realize. It's just empty. A cosmic void that feeds on human purpose because it has no purpose of its own. In this space between spaces, I can see the network Roberto described. Hundreds of threads of light connecting 7-Eleven locations across the country, each one feeding a different kind of hunger. Gas stations built on old battlefields, feeding entities that feast on conflict. Stores constructed over ancient burial grounds, feeding things that consume grief. Locations positioned at dimensional weak points, feeding creatures that devour hope, fear, love, ambition. And in the center of it all, a corporate headquarters that knows exactly what it's managing. I find the disconnect switch, a simple lever made of human bone and regret. As I reach for it, the root walker's consciousness speaks to me without words. You don't have to do this. Join us, work with us, help us make the feeding more efficient, less wasteful, help us create a better system. No, I say and pull the lever. The lever moves with surprising ease, like opening a door that's been waiting decades to be unlocked. The moment it clicks into position, every light in the mind system flickers and dies. Darkness floods the chamber, but it's not empty darkness. It's alive, writhing with the death screams of something ancient as its feeding network collapses. The root walker's consciousness recoils from me like I've become poisonous, and I feel myself being ejected from its core awareness. I hit the chamber floor hard, gasping air that tastes like copper and freedom. Around me, I can hear the sound of metal roots retracting, pulling back into the feeding apparatus with wet, tearing sounds. The workers cry out, not in pain, but in confusion, like people waking from dreams they can't quite remember. Where am I? Dale's voice cuts through the darkness. What was I doing? Roberto's mining helmet provides the only light in the chamber, and in its weak glow, I can see the workers stumbling around like newborns learning to walk. The metallic roots that connected them to the root walker have withered and crumbled, leaving small puncture wounds on their backs that heal even as I watch. The little girl sits beside her conveyor belt, no longer counting rocks. I remember my name, she whispers. Sarah Chen. I got lost in a snowstorm in 1983. My parents were driving from Denver to visit my grandmother in Alamosa. 39 years, Roberto says quietly. You've been down here 39 years. But Sarah doesn't look like she's aged a day since she was 8 years old. None of the workers do. The root walker's feeding process preserved them exactly as they were when they were captured, maintaining their bodies while consuming their purpose. The feeding apparatus continues to collapse, its organic components withering and its mechanical parts seizing up with the sound of gears grinding against rust that forms in real time. Whatever force kept this place frozen in 1952 is breaking down, and decades of accumulated decay are catching up all at once. We need to get everyone out, I say, helping Dale to his feet, before this whole place comes down. Austin. My duplicate's voice calls from across the chamber. It's standing near the tunnel entrance, but something's wrong with its appearance. The perfect human facade is cracking, revealing something underneath that reflects light like polished metal. You've destroyed something beautiful, something efficient. Do you have any idea how many people will die now? What do you mean? The ancient things the 7-Eleven network feeds. They won't just go back to sleep. They'll wake up hungry and start feeding themselves. No protocols, no management, no careful rationing of victims. Just raw, uncontrolled predation. Roberto spits on the ground. Better honest monsters than corporate-managed ones. The duplicate laughs, and the sound echoes strangely in the collapsing chamber. You think this was about evil? This was about survival. Humanity's survival. The old things were always going to wake up eventually. We just found a way to manage their hunger, to feed them sustainably, while protecting the majority of the population. By turning people into livestock. By maintaining balance. But now, the duplicate's human appearance falls away entirely, revealing something that looks like a store mannequin made of mirror-bright metal. Now the balance is broken, and the consequences will reach far beyond this little gas station. The ceiling groans, and chunks of rock begin falling into the chamber. Whatever structural integrity the root walker's presence maintained is failing, and the mine is finally accepting the cave-in that should have happened 70 years ago. "Move!" Roberto shouts, leading the rescued workers toward the tunnel that leads back to the storage room. "Stay together, stay on the tracks, and don't look back." We run through corridors that are aging and fast forward. Support beams sag and crack. Ore carts rust and crumble, and the very air seems to decay around us. Behind us, I can hear the duplicate calling out in that multi-toned voice, but its words are lost in the sound of a mine system dying after decades of artificial preservation. The tunnel to the storage room has changed. Instead of the smooth passage we entered through, we're now climbing through a jumble of broken rock and twisted metal. Real cave-in debris, not the maintained pathway the root walker had created for its feeding operations. "Keep climbing," Roberto encourages the workers. Almost there. Sarah Chen reaches the top first, pulling herself through the gap where the storage room should be. But when I follow her through, we're not in the 7-Eleven storage room anymore. We're standing in a field of tall grass under a star-filled sky with the lights of Highway 50 visible in the distance. "Where's the building?" Dale asks, looking around in confusion. I turn back to look at where we emerged, and there's nothing there. No building, no gas pumps, no sign that a 7-Eleven ever existed at mile marker 237. Just an empty lot with a few concrete foundations poking through the grass like broken teeth. "It was never really there," Roberto explains. "Not the way you understood it. The root walker created the building as a feeding trap, using the 7-Eleven corporate network to give it legitimacy. When the feeding system collapsed, so did the illusion. The rescued workers stand in the field, looking lost and displaced. 40 people from different decades, all suddenly thrust into a world that's moved on without them. Sarah Chen stares at the highway with wide eyes, watching cars with headlights she doesn't recognize pass by at speeds that seem impossible to someone from 1983. "What happens to them now?" I ask Roberto. "Same thing that happens to you. You find a way to live with what you know. You try to warn people, but nobody believes stories like this. You watch for other 7-Elevens, other gas stations built in places that feel wrong, and you hope that someone else will be brave enough to pull the lever when the time comes. And the network? The other locations?" Roberto's expression grows grim. Still feeding. Still managing their ancient hungers according to corporate protocols. But now they know that disconnection is possible. They'll be more careful, more secure. What you did here won't happen easily at other locations. In the distance, I can see emergency vehicles approaching. Fire trucks and police cars responding to reports of explosions and strange lights at mile marker 237. But they won't find anything to investigate. Just an empty lot and a group of confused people with stories no one will believe. Esperanza Valdez emerges from the grass beside me, no longer wearing her 7-Eleven uniform. She looks older than she did in the mine, aged by the weight of understanding rather than the passage of time. "Austin," she says, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Thank you. For all of us. What will you tell people? About where you've been for 2 weeks? Same thing you'll tell people about tonight. The truth." And when they don't believe us, we'll just have to live with knowing what really happened. The emergency vehicles reach the empty lot, and I watch the firefighters search for the building that was never really there. They'll find nothing, file a report about a false alarm, and move on to the next emergency. But somewhere across the country, other 7-Elevens continue their night shifts. Other cashiers follow protocols they don't understand. Other ancient things sleep fitfully in their corporate-managed dreams. The network is wounded but not destroyed. And now it knows that someone figured out how to fight back. The Walmart in Alamosa hired me without asking too many questions about the gap in my employment history. Night shift, stocking shelves, minimum wage, plus $1 for working graveyard hours. Simple work that doesn't require protocols or laminated cards with handwritten rules. My new manager, Rita Sandoval, mentioned during orientation that the previous night stalker quit suddenly, leaving only a note about finding something better. She didn't seem curious about what better might mean for someone willing to work midnight shifts in a small mountain town. I don't mind the work. After what I've seen, organizing soup cans and restocking toilet paper feels wonderfully mundane. No customers pay with money that smells like graves. No coffee makers brew themselves. No voices speak from drainage grates in the floor. But I've learned to pay attention to details other people ignore. The Walmart sits on land that used to be a cattle ranch, built over ground that holds nothing more sinister than old fence posts and forgotten irrigation ditches. The building's foundation rests on solid bedrock with no caves, no mine shafts, no spaces where ancient things might sleep. I checked the county records to be sure. Sarah Chem lives with a foster family in Denver now. The state placed her in a program for children with unusual circumstances, which apparently includes being 8 years old in a world that's aged 40 years without you. She sends me letters sometimes, written in careful cursive that belongs to a different era. She's learning about smartphones and internet and social media, trying to catch up with a childhood that was stolen from her. Dale Carver bought a small auto repair shop in Denison. He works on classic cars, restoring vehicles from decades he actually lived through. Roberto Archuleta disappeared the night we escaped the mine, walking into the mountains with his mining helmet and canvas work clothes. Sometimes hikers report seeing an old-fashioned miner on the high trails, but he's never there when they look twice. Esperanza Valdez died peacefully in her sleep 6 weeks after our escape. Natural causes, the doctor said, heart failure brought on by stress and exhaustion, but I think she simply chose not to carry the weight of what she'd learned any longer. She'd earned her rest. The empty lot at mile marker 237 remains empty. The county owns it now, listed in their records as former commercial property, foundation damage, not suitable for development. Travelers sometimes stop there when their cars break down, but they never stay long. Something about the place makes people want to keep moving. I drive past it every week, checking to make sure it stays empty. So far, no new buildings have appeared, no corporate signs announcing future development. But I've noticed other things. 7-Eleven locations in Grand Junction, Durango, Colorado Springs, all built in places that feel wrong. Gas stations positioned at crossroads where too many people go missing. Convenience stores with night shift employees who quit without explanation. The network is still out there, still feeding its ancient partners according to carefully managed protocols. But now they know that someone escaped, someone talked, someone pulled the emergency disconnect lever and lived to tell about it. They're more careful now. The protocols have changed, become more subtle, harder to recognize. But if you know what to look for, if you pay attention to the details, you can spot the signs. Cold money, coffee that brews itself, radios that speak in static, drains that breathe, rules written in someone else's handwriting. I stock shelves at Walmart, and wait for someone else to figure out what their job really requires. Because somewhere out there, another Austin Red Hawk is clocking in for the night shift, unaware that he's about to learn the true cost of corporate efficiency. The network remembers, the network adapts, and the network is always hiring.